Well, I'm back in the car. Look out. Thought I would make a quick video for you today for those of you interested, for those of you who have romantic relationship issues, SP issues as they call it, in the law of assumption and law of attraction communities. Thought I'd make a video for you today about why the techniques you use are not going to get your SP back. My stomach just growled. It's very pleased about this content, apparently, the subject of today's video. This is going to be a pretty blunt video. For those of you who didn't see the last video, where unfortunately I was not in the car, I was in the office, I'll put a link above to that. It's going to kind of, continue where that video left off. As I often say, I try to start where most of the advice you see on YouTube and elsewhere, social media wise, regarding SP manifestation stuff ends. My creative partner, my friend Marvin Daniels, and myself, the SP coaching we do with people is very in-depth and holistic. And, if you do want to work with us, there's a link below to a questionnaire. You can fill that out and we can set up a free consultation if you're serious about doing the work. But what Marvin and I offer people is a holistic approach to changing their life. In other words, their self-concept, right? Like Neville always talked about. Change the self and the outer world will follow. And the techniques you hear on YouTube and elsewhere, and mind you, I think YouTube explains this stuff better than anywhere else, social media wise. I think YouTube is a better place to learn about techniques than Reddit or Instagram or TikTok or anywhere else. YouTube is better than that. But the way it's explained is too one size fits all, too black and white, too dogmatic most of the time to actually have the permanent lasting change to self that you want. And so, of course, in my opinion, you're better served going to the actual sources a lot of the time. For instance, to read Neville, to read Joseph Murphy, to read Florence Scovel-Shinn, to read whoever who describe these ideas in a more elegant, refined, and nuanced way than most of the YouTubers talking about them. And even better is to read those guys, to try to integrate that advice, and then to get help, to get coaching to help you integrate them more. Or if don't want to get coaching, to get therapy to help you integrate them more. Now, a lot of you are going to say, well, therapy, that doesn't have to do with the law of assumption. And I will say, fuck you, you're on. See, the difference between Marvin and I and most of these coaches is that we don't fucking play around. And now I'm going to start swearing. Because the technique is not enough most of the time. And Papa Bear Tim knows more about these techniques in terms of how they are applied and the nuances behind a lot of them compared to virtually any coach you're going to see on YouTube. For instance, robotic affirmations, Sammy Ingram talks about them very, very well. And I like a lot of her content. But the way she talks about them is in a just a one basically specific way over and over again. She doesn't really explain the nuances. So as great a teacher as she is in many ways, she only talks about them in one manner. While, if you know my stuff, I talk about robotic affirmations, affirming, and autosuggestion in a much more encompassing, holistic way, where we bring in Emile Coué, who I don't know if Sammy's even knows about. Comment please if Sammy knows about Emile Coué, if she's done videos on them, because I'd like to watch them if she has. I'm curious. But where we talk about Coué, we talk about various other kinds of conscious autosuggestion and affirmations besides just robotic affirmations, like the more or like the Neville version of affirmations of like isn't it wonderful, falling asleep in sats, reciting something over and over again, Murphy's way, Catherine Ponder's way, etc. It's much more encompassing and based upon, your sensibility. We give you multiple options, which, Sammy, as great as her robotic affirmation advice is, it doesn't necessarily give you quite as many nuanced options, right? And I'm giving her as an example because she's a great example of a teacher who can be very helpful, has a ton of success stories, and at the same time, even though that's the case, we should not pretend that her technique, the robotic affirmation technique, or any technique we hear about from Neville or anyone else, is going to work for everybody in this blanket way. The truth of the matter is, the majority of you guys are going to fail using any of these techniques to manifest your specific person back. And not just like a little bit of the majority. It's not going to be a swing state situation, 51-49. The truth of the matter is, guys, if you want to change your romantic life going forward forevermore, and your focus is really on these techniques and not on doing the more nuanced inner work, which is based upon working through the resistance and trauma that you've had in your life, and noticing that stuff more and more, becoming increasingly aware of it, and working through it usually with love and self-compassion and with acknowledgement. If you don't do that and only focus on the technique, for instance, robotic affirmations or SATs, or just journaling without the accompanying processing of the emotions that come up, if you just are focusing on the technique, as great as the technique may be, it's not going to be enough most of the time. So robotic affirmations for manifesting an SP back, I would conjecture people who are using robotic affirmations, this is the truth, probably 90% of people trying to manifest their SP back, at least 90%, if not higher, might be much higher, might be more like 95 or 98%, or 99%, fail to manifest their SP back using robotic affirmations in a way that's fulfilling. In other words, they might get their SP back, but they realize, a month later, 2 months later, the SP's gone again, or we're having the same issues we had before. And you start affirming to change it, and it doesn't create a lasting change. It's only when we robotically affirm, knowing it's a tool to help us work through our resistance and our trauma in our past and change it, revise it, as Neville liked to say, so we look at ourselves in a newer, healthier way, that the real demonstration of these principles comes forth. And the SP doesn't just come back, the SP stays. And the SP's behavior towards you changes because your behavior towards yourself has changed. That's the deep shit. That's the stuff that other channels don't talk about, generally speaking, that Marvin and I touch upon. And there obviously are a few channels, not obviously, there are a few channels that talk about this. I shouldn't say there are none. There are a few. But, most of the coaching, quote unquote, coaching on here is not real coaching. It's giving you techniques. It's over-promising and under-delivering. And good coaches, good counselors in any mental health or spiritual space, do not really want to do that. They want to provide you the help they can give you and not overpromise and tell you things that are not going to happen, if they're not going to happen, probably. I'm all for you using robotic affirmations if you like them. I'm all for you journaling or using SATs. But for most of you, the vast majority of you, it's going to take more than just that one technique to shift your self-concept dramatically in a lasting way. You understand? It's going to take the corresponding resistance that comes up, a change of how you work through the resistance that you didn't utilize before. Yeah. So, robotic affirmations are a great tool. SATs are a great tool. Journaling is a great tool to help you do that. But you're going to face resistance. Resistance that's where the magic lies, is the resistance. The resistance starts to come up. The shit starts to come up. That's how you know you're doing the work. Because that's when it gets real. You got to work through that. And what happens for most people is that stuff comes up and they freak the fuck out. They go, oh shit, I don't want to do this. I want to do a technique. The technique's supposed to make me avoid this. No, the technique is going to bring you to that. And that's how we get the treasure. We go through the mud, the shit, to get to the treasure. There's no way to avoid that, at least for most of us. There's no way around it. We go right into the shit. And it's nice to have someone to hold your hand and say, you're okay. This is normal. This happens to everybody. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not going to die. Nothing terrible is going to happen by looking at the shit going through the shit. And when you get out the other side, you're going to be a better person. And in all likelihood, your external reality will be better too. But as I always like to tell clients and tell people on YouTube, even if your external reality is pretty much the same, if you feel better, that's a worthwhile change in and of itself. That's reason enough to do the work. But it's spiritual bypassing to say, oh, I'm gonna do this certain thing or think about something in a certain way and basically live my life exactly the same as I had before, but just do this special technique or whatever, and it's gonna change everything. That's essentially delusional. And I know people say, be delulu, da 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 da, but people who act delulu for a long time usually aren't happy. Common sense and rationality, in my experiences, plays much more of a positive part in this than people like to think. And there's no need to fool ourselves and to think that we're doing something, magical or delusional and, it makes, the universe align around us. I mean, all that's just words to basically hypnotize you, as I was saying recently. The reality is we're working with our thinking, our imagination in a new way to think, i.e. imagine differently in regards to ourselves and our life. And if we do that, how we feel inwardly changes and outwardly our life starts to change as well. And this can happen very quickly. But it is, in my, at this point, many experiences, both with myself and working with others, so very different than the sensationalized technique mongering and over-promising that we hear on YouTube. It's much more subtle, nuanced, and ultimately, long-term, a lot more gratifying than that. Feeling better about yourself, your self-concept, ain't no joke. And it's something you can take with you for the rest of your life. But we have to look at our so-called demons. We have to look at our flaws, our past quote-unquote mistakes, our past sins, as Neville would like to say, us missing the mark. And we have to look honestly at perhaps why that happened and how it made us feel. And we have to correct that. We have to correct our course of action in that regard. Because often something that happened to us when we were 6 years old or 10 years old or 16 years old is still affecting us emotionally, basically in the same way as it did when we were that age. We have not outgrown that. We've run away from it, but we haven't outgrown it. And it's time to stop running and to grow out of it into something better. It's one reason Kuei said every day in every way I'm getting better and better. So I hope this video was a helpful reminder for some of you. I actually wasn't that stern. I didn't swear that much. If you would like coaching or help, I can be reached over at radicalcounselor.com. Glad to be back in the car. Until next time, enjoy.